when I was reading through the books again in these past several months, one of the things that that I saw almost immediately, and I know I'm not the only person to see this, is that all of your work, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, has an elegiac quality to it. Things you're mourning, things that you feel have been lost, things that you're trying to keep from being lost. And I was really struck by the difference in how you approach those issues in your fiction rather than in your nonfiction. And I wondered if you could start by talking a little about that. You take on some very important issues in the fiction, environmental issues, issues of people under attack or under duress, and it's never polemical. So can you talk a little bit about your approach and how you do that?
In fiction, you can get away with polemical. I mean, I usually have somebody else being polemical. In Shadow Country, it's a man named Spec Daniels, who's outrageous and himself was some criminal type, but very smart and very lively, and he has ideas about how we've gone about the problems in this country, the shadow over the country, which is racism, war, picking on small brown countries, all the things that we still have strongly, and I feel very strongly about it. But if I did that in nonfiction, people would say, well, this is absolutely strident, or I would be sued for $49 million, which happened once. So I can't very well be strident in the nonfiction it's supposed to be based on fact. So you have to keep your voice down a certain amount. But you can have a character screaming and say absolutely anything at all, and if they're smart and if they're funny, it's better if they're funny. It works.
But even when you have a character who is being extreme in that way, you always then undercut him, either with humor or with another point of view pretty quickly, it seems.
Well, you put it, once you get the point across, you can afford to give them a little, soften up the dose a little bit. Yeah.
I'm curious about the title Shadow Country. It's about the shadow over this country, but it's also kind of evocative of the idea of a shadow brother in Indian culture.
Yeah, shadow brother, shadow landscape.
Or a shadow cousin, which I'm not exactly sure what a shadow cousin is.
A shadow cousin is Ed Watson. He's a cousin that the family's ashamed of, they don't talk about. And Watson's father was a shadow cousin, and he became a shadow cousin too. That's really what that is.
You know, Watson is, I think, one of the most complicated characters in literature. You want to hate him. He seems, depending on whose stories you believe, he's a terribly evil guy or a terribly misguided guy. I have to say, though, by the end of Shadow Country, I was actually a little in love with him. And I don't know if I'm the only one who felt that way, but there's a lot of ambiguity in that character.
One of the ambitions I had with Watson was to make this man a human being, to make him somebody that we could recognize, a warm-blooded person full of all the aches and pains we all have. And I think I was inspired by a book we were talking about earlier, a little earlier, which was Under the Volcano. The protagonist in there, the consul, is a total loss. This guy's a hopeless alcoholic, and he messes up everything he touches and ends up dead, thrown down a ravine to the dogs in Mexico. He comes to a very bad end, having messed up absolutely everything, and yet you love him. By the end, you really love this man. He hurts, he bleeds, he whatever. And I thought, here's Ed Watson, who supposedly was a multiple murderer. And it's true, it's very difficult to separate Watson from about 7 killings. Only one of which I suspect might have been done for a fee. he's not a good guy. He's brutal and ruthless and violent and all of these things. And also a very bad drunk, a mean drunk, you know. But he did not kill 55 people, which was the legend down there when I started working on this book. He was a mass Bluebeard practically. And I got finally to talk to an awful lot of people who knew him, including one direct child and a number of grandchildren. And I did find out finally a lot about him, and also the people who killed him. Even the people who killed him liked him and were amused by him, and they admired him in certain ways. They were just scared to death of this guy, that's all. Scared of his temper and his volatility and all these things. They admitted he was a genius farmer. He was really very, very good. He became an expert boatman in almost no time at all. He never sailed a boat. He was running his own schooner up these rivers, the sandbars and everything. That's tough duty. And he was really quite a guy. And he had 3 wives, and the best that I can find out, these wives loved him. These women really loved him. And he had quite a lot of other ladies who kind of liked him too, and he had children with them and the works. Mm-hmm. So, and also he was fun. He was a great storyteller. He was actually, did happen in Fort White, Florida. There's an old hotel there, the Sparkman Hotel, old yellow hotel. And he'd be in there every Saturday, regaling the people who came in for lunch. He was an entertainer, he was a big ham. He liked that part too. So he was an enormously complex guy, and I'm delighted you were a little bit in love with him at the end. A number of people did say, and that was just the best thing you can hear, they were sorry to see him killed. Even acknowledging this man's very bad qualities, there's no question he was a dangerous bad guy. But he also, you know, if you look, as somebody's pointed out, the great American fortunes, if you look behind them, not even very carefully, you'll find murder and all the rest, robbery and whatever. In those days, in Watson's day, that kind of brutal rapine was very, very common indeed. Usually it was done for them by their lieutenants. They'd be a very well trained guy who would take care of the dirty work. You go out and play golf, boss, and we'll take care of this, you know. There was a lot of that. And Watson was just in a pickle. He was over there on the west coast of Florida where there was nothing, and he was on the run himself. And he actually tried to arrange a lieutenant here and there, but he was, I'll just finish this quickly. He was not really, in my view, a natural-born killer. He had this nephew who was, Leslie Cox, but Watson himself wasn't. And generally speaking, more and more, you see him working other people to do the killing for him. He really did not have much stage for it. He didn't, and this is also a weakness. This is very cowardly of him in a way too. He let these younger guys who adored him. He was a desperado. He allegedly had killed Belle Starr, the outlaw woman, and all these things. And he just conned them in a way. So he had, that was maybe his most unpleasant quality to me.
He's not your only character, though, that is on that fine line, cozying up to evil and capable of killing. Moon is a little bit like that, and it played in the fields of the Lord. Yeah. Is your first. What attracts you to characters like that?
And I always have been. I'm interested in, and I think this is probably why I'm not. This may be completely a cop-out. If it is, it is. But you know, I was born right here in Manhattan, a few blocks away from here. But I've never been very successful with New York critics or writers. And I think it may be, I don't write about urban things. I'm not much interested in suburbia either. And I think those are the, you know, I'm interested in people who are really on the edge, who have to deal with very, very powerful, dangerous things. These people are interesting, who have real problems in life and not really neurotic ones. And I got plenty of neurotic problems of my own, so I don't need to write about it too. And somehow, I don't know, it's more exciting. It may be a childish trait in me, but it's always been true. And these three novels that Noreen has chosen, which are arguably the best of the three of them, are all about who wants to read in New York City, who wants to read about, in order, half-breed soldiers of fortune, mixed-breed sailors on a turtle schooner out of Grand Cayman Island, and Ed Watson, the swamp rat, and all the swamp rat friends. I mean, these are not people you want in your living room, but all my books seem to end up about people like that. So I guess
You know, you actually...
I wandered away from your question, which I've now forgotten.
I'll take us back a little bit. You actually you give it to the characters a little bit, this question in At Play in the Fields of the Lord. You say, I guess Quarrier and Father Santes are walking along after Moon flies off, and Quarrier says, why are you so sympathetic to Moon? These men are mercenaries, very probably criminals. And the priest says, well, how is it we pass so much of our time in talk of him? Let us be honest, is it not the banditry of Moon that so unsettles us? We all sit up, we call old names at him, we cannot be comfortable while he is there, yet we circle in uneasily. What is his secret? What does this man know that we do not? And alas, now he has gone away, and with him some sort of, and in the book this is in italics, possibility, as a question, for all of us. Can you talk a little bit about that section? And what?
Well, actually it is interesting. Who among our circle of acquaintance, the people we know, who do we wind up talking about the most? It's often not the person who on the surface would seem the most praiseworthy or interesting or even the most intelligent. It's usually somebody whom we can't solve, somebody quirky who keeps bugging us, and you often wonder, why do we talk so much about this guy? He's a mess, or whatever, but it's true that they seem to know something that we need, and they're refreshing in some way. They refresh us. It's something like that. I don't know.
Did they see something?
For example, but I know this is childish, but for example, there's this man in D.B. Cooper who held up the airplane and then parachuted out of it with all the money and vanished into the wilds of Nevada or Oregon or someplace. Mm-hmm. I've always been fascinated by that guy. I'd love to have known who D.B. Cooper was. The guy would have the gall to do that and have that idea. And yes, he did something dishonest. Yes, he was a thief, but listen, we have so many thieves in Congress, we don't
Which brings me to the question, do you think that there are things that fiction can do that your nonfiction can't do? I'm not suggesting fiction can save the world, but are there things that you think, by writing about these issues in fiction, that can be posed more eloquently or have more impact?
Fiction potentially has mystery to it, things that cannot be explained. And you can go much deeper into human behavior, it seems to me, in a much more subtle way, and take chances with the prose. So for me, fiction is endlessly stimulating. Now, I'm just telling my friend A.J. Maddow that I'm involved in writing a book that I don't like, so that book's not very stimulating yet. But generally speaking, it is. And nonfiction, unless it's, for me, a great adventure. And in a great adventure, you're kind of on the borders of fiction anyway, not because you're stretching the truth, but because you're in a mythic place. It's whatever attracted you to that place in the first place, the Himalayas or New Guinea or South America. But generally speaking, you are stuck with the facts, or you should be. And you're writing up the facts. You're doing, it may be very high level journalism, but it is that, or investigative reporting, which I rather like because I'm usually after some bad guy. But, you know, but fiction, you don't know what's coming up next. That's what I love about it. Anything can happen. And it usually does. You know, it's just a mystery. And I find it energizing. A long day of writing at my desk with a nonfiction job or a project, I'm worn out. I need my dry martini very badly. And I don't feel that. I get, with fiction, I come in and I'm exhilarated. What does that tell you? You know, there's something that's appealing to that part of your mind. I have to say flat out, I'm much better known for my nonfiction, I think, especially that book called The Snow Leopard, which put a nail in my fiction coffin. But I thought of myself as a fiction writer, and I'm so pleased to be here. I'm very pleased Noreen invited me in the Fiction Center because this is what I thought I did for 8 or 9 years. I didn't write any nonfiction. I only did it to make money. And then the New Yorker came along and they started buying up, sending me places, and they bought up 7 or 8 of my books entirely, you know. And they paid very well. And I was married and I had kids and usual complications. And so that's how it happened. But I still think of myself as a fiction writer. This opinion is not shared by everybody, but that's
well, just everybody in this room. So.
Maybe everybody.
At least. You mentioned that you can take risks in fiction that you can't take in your nonfiction, but you take a different kind of risk too. Far Tortuga is in every sense of risk, is a risk-taking book, both in its topic and its approach to the topic, and formally how it lands on the page and how you use language. And you return to that a little bit at the end of Shadowland, that terrific ending.
Fragmenting head.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
this is the only time that you did that to that. Language is always beautiful, but this is the only time you've done it in quite that way. What made you do it that way?
I think there's two things. One was the novel before it was that Playing the Fields of the Lord, which is actually quite an ornate novel, the imagery and the metaphor and everything. And it's, you know, and I think it was okay, but nonetheless it was that. Far Tortuga is very, very spare, because I was doing a piece for the New Yorker, a nonfiction piece. It was called, and it was published eventually. It's called To the Mosquito Keys. But I went on this turtle voyage out of Grand Cayman Island on this ship, hunting green sea turtle down on the reefs off Nicaragua. And it was a very, very rough voyage indeed. They actually didn't have a berth for me. I was supercargo. And I slept on the deck with the turtles. And the turtles are upside down because if they're right side up, they suffocate themselves, the weight, and they pierce their flippers and lash them together. So they're all lying in this kind of holy position there. And their heads are on blocks because they're otherwise too uncomfortable for them. But her turtles, as you read in Alice in Wonderland, or Alice in Looking Glass, or they tend to weep and they sigh all night long, and there's tears pouring down. And on top of that, it has certain aspects of the chicken coop in there too. So I'm like, that's what I slept, you know. So I had this big mystique about the turtles, but these guys have no life preservers. They had no radio that worked. This old beat-up boat was half between a motorboat and a sailboat because they cut down the mast and then they had rebuilt the cabin. That season was getting away. Everything was piecemeal, and they were doing this enormously difficult rowing and hauling on these reefs with this trade wind going like hell, 20 to 25 knots all the time. And if you got in trouble, you were really in trouble. That was it, you know. And they did this, and their seamanship and their whole attitude was, I found, absolutely wonderful. But everything was bare, even the lifeboat, not the lifeboat, the turtle boat that they went off the ship with. The paint was worn down so far that it was transparent. And everything was like that. Everything was like that. So I said, this is terrific, this spareness. I really love this spareness. On top of that, when I wrote it, I was a very, very intense Zen student. And seeing Zen in that very spare eye where everything extras cut away. So I was really into the pure thing itself, you know, and you see things, if you describe them properly, you don't need a metaphor. You don't need an adjective. If you see it clearly enough, if you see, I described, we had quite a few cockroaches actually, and this cockroach that would come out from underneath a little galley shack on the deck, and its antennae going out way ahead of it, you know, like that. And those antennae, incredibly fine, incredibly, you know, thin, and golden color, and picking up that kind of tropical Caribbean light reflection from the water. Those two mysterious golden things going out there. Wow. You don't have to say they were like, you know, or whatever. It was just the thing itself. It was just beautiful and had that enormous power. I just love that. And I love writing about nature anyway, so even in cockroach antennae. So anyway, so what my ambition was, I had no images in there, no metaphors or similes at all. See if I get through the whole book without one metaphor or one simile. And I did, I slipped up, one of them got in there. I described Far Tortuga, which is an island mostly in the turtle men's imagination. It's the island they're going to retire to. It's covered with turtles. You know, it's got everything you can want in the world. It's on this mythical key they're going to retire to called Far Tortuga. And I said at one point, the island was like a memory in the ocean emptiness. And that's the only light in that whole, I think, in the whole book.
In the whole book?
Yeah. That one got by me. My line editor messed up there.
You also got the voices of the people there expertly. Did you spend a lot of time working on that and listening and recording? Did you use a tape recorder, and how did you do that?
I did when I first went down there. I have a pretty good ear. I couldn't understand a word these guys were saying. Not a word, because they're mixed Creole, Indian, black people, and several European strains in there, and also a very archaic language. It's sort of 14th century. It's the language that the old buccaneers must have used, you know, the guys who first got there and were coming in to get the turtles to take to eat on the ships. You know, it's a very tough language to pick up at first, and not so much the people you would meet down in the village. Although when I first went there was hardly a village at all. They didn't even have sunburn lotion. It was very tough to find that. But the fishermen were the most. Their dialect was the toughest of all by far. And I really had to. I did take a tape recorder along. I had to get the feel of it. I couldn't write that book. The book is all in dialect, which is one reason it got such violent, hostile reviews. Critics cannot stand dialect. That book got the best reviews I've ever done on any book, and the worst. The Village Voice said they did a wonderful review. It was about 4 pages long, with huge pictures of the author. It looked like they were reviewing the book of the century, and it was nothing but attack. And this guy ended up by saying, my advice to you is to start this book at the back and read forward. So it's 4 pages to make it rather thin, joke about it. But it did, it got horrible reviews, but it also got incredibly exciting reviews too. And that, to me, I'll take that as you got to swallow.
Do you remember your good reviews as well?
Yes, of course. The bad reviews are more fun to talk about. I'll tell you stories about my first agent.
That we want to hear. One of the strengths of Shadow Country that is how evocative it is of that landscape. And as I was reading it again this time, I was wondering how much of that is left. Is it left? Is anything left? What has happened since you wrote it?
Well, the Everglades I mean, we are doing our best to wreck it, and I certainly deal with that a lot. And every governor says they're going to save it. The Everglades is really an extraordinary ecosystem. We don't realize what we have there. It's not very beautiful to everybody. My wife hates the Everglades. She never sets foot there again. She'd be very happy. It's crawling. It's got four species of poisonous snakes crawling with bugs of all sorts. Now it's got pythons behind every bush, eating everything, including the children and dogs. You know, we have really messed it up, and mainly the water drainage. We wrecked all the great bird rookeries and stuff like that. Yeah, we really have. We're poisoning that water. And there is really nothing like the Everglades. It's an immense river, 40 miles across, moving very slowly across limestone. And where it hasn't been damaged, it's beautifully clear water, lovely water, with these islands all through it, and the islands are all shaped like tears because of the flow. They're all shaped by that very slow flow, so you have all these lozenge-shaped, beautiful islands like green ships going up over this clear, shimmering water, expanse of water. And I love it, I love it. And Florida, to this day, I think, you get away from the coasts, you can find some wild places. And you can find some wild people too. That I like. If you go to there's some backcountry saloons still in Florida that are rough places indeed. I wrote about one of them in Shadow Country. We used to call the old Gator Hook Bar. But there's some gator poachers and people like that. But so I kind of like Florida. I don't love the coast, but I love the interior. Florida's big. Florida was the biggest cattle state in the Union. We don't know. We think it's Montana or someplace, but it's not now, but it was at one time. Enormous cattle range there. There's all sorts of things you don't sort of think about when you think about Florida.
And what in Shadow Country, when I was reading the second part again, which is Lucius, I wondered if that was the part that most paralleled your own experience of learning about the story. And did you spend that kind of time just going from place to place and talking person to person?
I did do that.
You did?
Yeah, because I heard about Watson was a real man. I wish I'd changed his name now. I made that mistake. I should have changed his name very early on. But E.J. Watson was a real figure. He was probably the best known man in Southwest Florida for many decades, really. He was, and I did not go against what was known about it, but I had to. But everything that was known about it was wrong. I mean, the news accounts and the reports, and even the several books, and even in the book like that great book about the Everglades by Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, River Guys.
Yeah.
And she had 3 pages about Ed Watson in there, and every single fact she had was wrong. Every one. She hit a bullseye. And what she had in there was what people told her, the local people told her what she wanted to hear. Mm-hmm. And she even had this extraordinary, and the story is, as far as I can tell, it is true. Watson was shot down by a crowd of people. And 33 bullets, and this is accurate, so the sheriff's 33 bullets were removed from his body. So these people meant business. But everybody agreed that after the first shot, the rest was just sort of, the first shot was shot by a black guy. If you know your American history, 1910 in Florida, a black man even holding a gun in a crowd of white people, shooting at a white man? I don't think so. And of course, his name was Henry Short. Henry didn't want to be there. He was told to be there. They wanted him there because they knew he was a terrific shot. He was the only guy who could outshoot Watson. So it's an extraordinary myth. This poor, terrified black man, who was a wonderful man, but he was living under a cloud of fear, and all of his life. And the interesting thing was that the people of his generation, the people who were in the crowd and knew why he was there, they liked Henry. They all said he was a great worker, a great hunter, everything. But it was their sons that he was in danger. They didn't want to know about a black guy doing what their father should have done, you know. And the racism down there was absolutely terrifying. And it isn't, I'm sorry to say, it isn't over to this day. It really is not. I went to Watson. I had occasion to go to Watson Country with a black guy one time, and it was a very intense little thing, but it worked out okay. But I
still.
didn't like it. Still, to this day, yeah. It's better. I guess it's better. But there's still no black people in that community. They weren't allowed in there after 5 o'clock for years and years and years. And they have to get a shot over their head to go there now. So we're making progress, but we're not there yet. It's the shadow. That's the shadow.
I'm going to ask you just one question overall about your books. Is there a book that you feel that you wrote to have an impact, to create a response, a social response that you felt was effective to the degree that you wanted it to be? You know, the book about the fisherman on Long Island, or Leonard Peltier, or any of them that...
I wasn't good. Did it have the effect that I wanted it to have?
Yeah. But did it,
Oh.
I guess it's a hard question. The question is, did it do any good? You know? I mean...
Yeah, but you don't know.
You don't know. Yeah.
Leonard Peltier, I wrote this long book about, and I got sued by an FBI agent and the governor of South Dakota, the Viking press, and I did. Leonard is still in prison. It's his 35th year in prison. Although the U.S. government admits they never proved that he killed these FBI agents. And I've been working on the case for all that time, really now. And we haven't got him out yet. We nearly had him out. Clinton lost his nerve at the last minute. Anyway, so I won't get into that story, but I'll be here 2 nights telling that. And then I wrote another book about Indian problems elsewhere in the country, that usually having to do with their spiritual traditions, having to do with the destruction of their sacred sites by the bulldozers or the missionaries or the Bureau of Indian Affairs or whoever. And they are disregarded people, and it's stepped on where they can be. And of those 11 or 12 situations, I think we lost 9 out of 11. It was really good. We won 2, and I think 1 or both of those have been reversed. It's like the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. I write about a lot, you know. These people, they get beaten in court. They lick their wounds. They know they're losing it with the public. So they just sit tight. They got billions of bucks. Look at ExxonMobil's profits. They're not hurting. They can wait for 10 years. If they want to get that, they're going to get it. Sooner or later, they'll get a collection of paid-off politicians and who else. And it's very difficult to go up against that. But I think it's still worth it. If I talk to environmental groups, and they always say, how can you laugh as much as you do? The terrible things you're telling us, I mean, how things are so dark. And they are, but you might as well laugh. But it's not that. You're still doing good. You're still educating kids. You're still educating people coming out. You're saying, this is happening in your country. Is this really what you want? Can we be proud of this? And so forth. You know, and people, I'm so delighted by the Occupy Wall Street thing. This is so exciting. It's really a whole burst of new, because it's a generational thing. You see young people really coming forward and doing this. It's thrilling to old people like me, because we've been working for so long. I've been an environmentalist since I was 18. I've been in the trenches an awful long time, and we watched these people chew away and steal and bully and take everything. For what? For what purpose, really? And but it's discouraging. You work like that. I know so many people who are heroic people who put their whole lives into conservation, wildlife protection, clean air, whatever the cause may be, and they see it all going down the tube. You know, but we have stalled. There has been good legislation too. There have been progress. So we do win battles, but we're losing the fight. We're losing the war. And something has to make a big shift in this country. It really does, but I think the Occupy Wall Street for me, I didn't mean, I promised I would not get up on my soapbox. But that to me is a breath of fresh air. I'm just holding my breath and seeing what happens.
All right, I have one last question, and then I think if you could read a little bit from Shadow Country, and then we'll take a couple of questions. And the last question is a pretty simple one, and it is why you made the decision to give the game away at the beginning of Shadow Country. And we all know he's going to die. We know exactly how many bullets are going to kill him. Know exactly what's going to happen. You dispense with that as a driving the plot as a page turner entirely to ask another question.
Why did I do that?
Yeah, why did you do that, and what's the other question?
My British publisher asked the same thing. Matthiessen, why did you do that? I did. I wanted to get rid of the suspense right off the bat. He's going to get killed by his neighbors. Bam, that's it. That's the story's over. Because that's not what's interesting. And I didn't want to have this whole big book. I had a lot of things I wanted to do. I didn't want to depend on suspense and event that anybody with a brain in their head would see coming anyway. And it wasn't what was interesting. It wasn't that what happened, it was why. How is it that a community of not murderers or not criminal people, farmers and fishermen, all people like that, how could they turn around and shoot a neighbor like that? And especially a neighbor who, by and large, was liked almost as much as he was feared. How does it happen? How does 33 bullets end up in one guy in a far remote part of the Everglades? Why does this happen? What are the social forces here? That is what's interesting. And I wanted to get right into that. I wanted to get right into the ambiguity and everything like that. I didn't want to, I think that plot is a very precarious thing.
Okay, thanks.